The last part that's remaining in this CSS is specificity. It's something that we get this right and the rest of the CSS becomes a whole lot easier, and you can continue to explore on your own and build onto your web page. Everything else will start to make sense. Specificity helps us in trying to override each other's value, controlling the CSS. This is mostly because all the browsers follow a standard rule. If at all there is a CSS that is conflicting with other CSS, the browsers follow a standard rule. So in order to not make that mistake in your code and also to be in control of how you define your elements to be handled by the browser, we need to know that the tags or elements, they contain the least specific value, then the class selectors, the attribute selectors that we saw, and the pseudo selectors will have the next higher privilege, and then the IDs will be there, and everything else will be overridden when you apply a styling to the style attribute itself. Let's look at that with an example, what this exactly means. The more specific we are, the more there is precedence over the other. Let's see that with an example. I am using JS Fiddle again, and I have a small piece of code written here. I'd like you to also type the same command, the same code. So pause the video and please type these out. All I have is a section, a div, and a couple of paragraphs so that we can explain or test our understanding in CSS, and I would be able to demonstrate what specificity of CSS means. Let me take this now. The first start with, I'm going to apply to the tag. I take the section tag. So remember, this has a lower value, lower weightage. And I'm going to apply a background color. Let's say red. And then we put a padding just for the sake of it and to experiment. And the padding, we'll see padding in detail a lot later. Before I put any CSS at all, I'm going to run this just so you know how it looks without any styling, and I'm going to apply the styling and run again. Now you can see that this and the entire section now has a red padding, and there is a background color to that padding as well. So what happens now if I override this in some way? So I'm going to try that. So let me add a class now. I'm taking a I'm taking a style. Let's start with a class. That's a better example. I'm going to start a class selector, and I'm going to give it a name. All right, and let's see what happens if I take this class. And remember, when it's a class, we need to use the class selector is a dot, and then I give it the name, and then I'm going to say, now I want to modify the background color. Now theoretically, according to what we just learned, if I apply this, it should override the tags values, right? So I'm going to color this green, and let's see what happens if I run this. The whole thing turns green. So the class is overriding, although they are conflicting. The browsers decide to override the class's weightage over the weightage of a tag, and that's how the rules are set. So you need to be aware when you're writing your HTML and CSS. The next one is ID based weightage, like we saw in our, so that we saw tag and class attribute and pseudo class will all be the same. Now let's look at an example of an ID. So I'm going to ID this. So I'm going to write a conflicting CSS ID, and I'm going to give it a name called rock. Then I take this rock. If it's an ID, we need to use a hash tag and type the word rock. Then now I'm going to modify this green to something else. Let's say I'm going to change this to aqua, and oops, I run this, the color of this should get changed, but there is something I'm doing that isn't right. For some reason it's not getting overridden. For something is not right here. Let me see. So we have a, according we have a background, we have ID, so there is a typo error there, so I just need to take it off and then run this again, and the thing turns aqua. So we all make mistakes, so even after all the years I make, it's a very common thing. If you do run into some errors like this, don't be hard on yourself. It happens with everyone, even the most experienced run into these kind of problems, and it's completely normal. So cut some slack and keep that chin up. These things will become familiar as you keep going, working, and getting your hands dirtier, and it'll all come to you eventually. So keep going. Now let me add. So that's we demonstrated how ID overrides class, and now I'm going to add another. The most weighted of all is the style. So I'm going to add the style itself, which is where I'm adding the style attribute straight away, applying it to the HTML element. This is the daddy of all CSS. So I'm going to just type right here, background color is blue. This overrides everything else there is, and see what happens. So everything becomes blue. So that's a simple explanation of how the specificity works. We need to know this, and you can anytime, let's say you've written a CSS, but some section of your HTML code or a div or an article or a header needs a change, then you can bring in your understanding of specificity to be able to override those classes so that you do not compromise on the design or an overall user experience. Hope you enjoyed watching, and I look forward to be talking to you and some more interesting stuff in the next session. Thank you.